Hello friends, my name is Jeka Panasiuk and I am still traveling to tropical islands in search of new adventures, with elements of fishing, hunting, spearfishing and bushcraft. And of course I'm testing myself in survival conditions. Today I'm starting with spearfishing, and for that I'll be using a homemade spear gun. Since I'll be spearfishing far from the shore, where it's deep and the water temperature is very low, I'll need the proper equipment for underwater hunting. The water was crystal clear and there were many fish underwater. What pleased me was that there were no sharks in sight on the horizon. Even though there were plenty of fish, they kept their distance, so I needed to sneak up on them unnoticed. I found a big bamboo raft floating on the water, which served as a hiding spot for small fish, and a big predator was preying on them. I approached from the other side and spotted a sizable triple-tail that seemed curious about my presence. I took advantage of the moment, waited for the right angle, and made a precise shot. Catch acquired, and I won't waste any time returning to the shore. Today, I plan to explore new areas of this island, so I'll take my catch with me and leave the spearfishing equipment at the camp. I'm heading into the jungle to seek more adventures. I reached a fast-flowing river and decided to follow its course to collect some edible fruits like papaya and coconuts, which will be helpful throughout the day. Down the river, I arrived at an open water body that connected to the ocean. I set up my camp there to cook the caught fish, but first I needed to make a fire. I used a stone and a dry palm bark to create sparks, and it ignited the fire. After the fire got going, I cleaned the fish using my knife. I removed all the guts and gills. When the fire produced coals, I placed a banana leaf on them and put the fish on top, covering it with another banana leaf. Let the fish cook. Not far from the water, I set up my hammock to relax while the fish cooked. The place was cozy, with the sound of water, thick foliage overhead, bird and nature sounds, and fresh air. A very interesting place I hadn't been to before. I occasionally changed the leaves and flipped the fish until it was fully cooked. After about 15 minutes, my fish was ready. It wasn't perfectly grilled, but still quite edible. The triple tail was delicious. Bon appetit! After finishing the fish, I headed to a new water body to explore it. What useful things could I catch here? Perhaps there are crabs or shrimps. Judging by this small dead fish, it looked very strange and I had never seen such a species before. Just look at its peculiar head shape. I was eager to catch something in this water body because it's where fresh and saltwater meet, and local fish species might be different from what I'm used to. So without wasting time, I made a primitive fishing rig. However, I had limited options. I had only thin fishing line and just one small hook left in my backpack. I also had thick fishing line and large hooks meant for shark fishing. So I had no choice but to use the thin line and the last hook. I fashioned a makeshift fishing rig and dug up a few worms from the grass to use as bait. I found a clean and comfortable spot and started fishing. I cast my line, put the bait on the hook, and waited for a bite. In just a couple of minutes, I got the first nibbles, but the fish took the first worm. I changed the bait and cast again. I used my finger as a bite indicator, and suddenly there was a strong and sharp tug. I set the hook, but the fish wasn't on it. And all because there was no hook either. The fish cut off my last hook. And that's when the thought crossed my mind that there might be piranhas living in this body of water. That's why the fish easily snatched my hook away. I quickly attached the camera to the pole and lowered it into the water to try to see who lives there. But the water was very murky and I couldn't see anything. I must say, I was really upset. Losing my last small hook was a disaster. Now I'll have to make a rig for shark fishing, a huge hook and a thick fishing line. I don't know, maybe I'll catch a turtle, a monitor lizard or a crocodile underwater, because I have no idea what could bite on such a hook. But I won't lose hope. I'll cast it out, wait and see if anything bites. It's just really frustrating that the fish were biting right from the first cast, and after each strike, they cut the hook off. Maybe I tied it wrong. I should have made a wire leader for the hook, but I didn't bother, and it seems the fish took the bait along with the main line and just cut it off. Maybe it was a piranha, I don't know. Anyway, I'm setting up the gear for catching sharks, and I'll try to catch something with it in this lake. I need to find a good fishing spot. How about this piece of wood? I'm not joking about the piece of wood. Big rod, big fish. I think this branch will match well with the thick fishing line and the huge hooks for sharks. Look, the rod responds well all along the blank. I took out the fishing line from my backpack. It was quite big for catching large fish, and the hooks were appropriately sized. I don't have a choice, so I'm making this rig. I tie the hook firmly at the end of the fishing line and attach the line to the wooden rod. To avoid damaging the line for just one fishing session, I decided not to cut it into pieces, but distributed the leftover line along the rod and the perimeter of the fishing pole, tying it to the wooden stick. I tied the line with the reel at the very end of the fishing rod, and here I have this very primitive setup for catching some big sea monsters. You can rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments right now. How many points would you give this fishing rod? Also, feel free to make predictions if I'll be able to catch anything with this setup. As bait, I'll be using a dead fish I found. I'll just cut it into pieces and put it on the hook. It looks very juicy and appetizing. Well, here goes the first cast. Of course, the fish didn't seem interested in such a big bait, but I didn't lose hope and kept casting. Time passed, and the fish weren't biting, but I didn't give up. I genuinely hoped for some kind of bite, maybe a crocodile or a turtle, anything. Then I thought, what if the fish already ate my bait? And I didn't notice. I pulled the hook out of the water to check, but the bait was still on the hook. So I cast it back into the water. Suddenly I got a big strike. It was something enormous. The force of this creature was enough to pull me on my backside towards the water. The fishing rod was almost yanked out of my hands. I couldn't even imagine what it could be. The piece of wood bent easily like a reed. I pushed with my feet with all my strength, trying to pull myself back. And then I saw it, a huge black fish. It had an enormous mouth, and its fins were covered in sharp spikes. It's not something I could handle with bare hands, so I took off my cap, wrapped my hand with it, and tried to grab the fish by its lower lip. I used the cap to protect myself from its sharp, big teeth. The fish was incredibly strong and broke free from my grip, landing back in the water near the shore. At first, I didn't understand what had happened, but at the last moment, I noticed that it had unhooked itself. And when I reached out to grab it again, it swiftly swam into the depths. At that moment, I even considered jumping after it into the water. But as for what else might live in this body of water, I could only guess. I didn't lose hope and decided to try my luck again. I cast the line into the water and sat there, waiting for another bite. The water was very calm, like a mirror, and there were no signs of fish. I made another cast. Suddenly, the fishing line tightened strongly. I quickly pulled the rod, and there it was again, something very big on the hook. I fought with all my strength because I didn't want to lose the fish. But suddenly, my huge wooden fishing rod snapped under the strain. The fish was so powerful that it easily broke the wooden rod in half. However, I didn't panic. I grabbed the remaining part of the rod and then caught the fishing line with my bare hands, pulling the fish towards me. The line cut into my hands painfully, and as the fish tried to slip away, I got cuts and burns on my hands. But after a couple of minutes, the fish started to give up. I took off my cap, wrapped my hand to protect it, and tried to grab the fish by its mouth to pull it onto the shore. The fish had big, sharp spikes on its fins and very sharp teeth in its mouth. It was clear that it was a predatory fish, and I needed something to protect my hands if I wanted to get it onto the shore. It was a large, dark grayish-green grouper. In the water, it was blackish-green, but when I held it in my hands, it immediately changed its color to a lighter shade. An amazing fish, very big and very strong. I managed to catch my prey. Now I need to find a cozy spot and prepare it. I returned to the river, walked a bit upstream, found a convenient spot, and started a fire to cook my catch. The nature around was amazingly beautiful, and I realized that the tropical climate suits me perfectly. I found a suitable place near the river, took out my knife, and began cleaning the fish. After rinsing it a bit, I made some small cuts to ensure the meat would cook evenly over the fire. The fish was quite big, so these cuts would help the meat cook properly. Now it's time to gather some dry firewood. Coconut shell will serve as a tinder, and I've collected both small and large dry branches. I need a strong fire, so I'm looking for big logs to start my campfire. I'll also need dry leaves and grass. Now I'll carve a big wooden stick to use as a spindle. I'll use it to create friction and start the fire. I've sharpened one end of the stick with a knife. Now comes the challenging part, my mission to create fire without matches, a lighter, or even a fire starter. For this, I'll need 2 wooden sticks. One will be the drill and the other the base. I'll also use a small cord. The drill should be round and smooth. I made small notches all around it to give it a more angular shape so that the cord won't slip during rotation. As a bow, I'll use the spindle I prepared for the fish. I tie a string to one end. Create a slight indentation and prepare the base where I'll drill the hole. I also put dry coconut shell underneath to collect the ember and blow it into flame. I hold all this in one hand, take the bow in the other hand, and the so-called drill in my third hand. I wrap the cord around the drill, hold the loose end of the cord with my hand, and press it against a branch so that the cord is taut. With the other hand, I take the wooden base and press it against the drill, using it as a pivot, and start rotating. This way, I'll attempt to create fire. The cord forces the drill to rotate, and the friction creates a small ember in the wooden base. Now I carefully transfer this charcoal onto the coconut shell and gently blow on it to make it ignite. And finally, I place the coconut shell with the ember into the dry grass and easily get the fire going. That's how you can create fire without matches, a lighter, or a fire starter just by using 2 wooden sticks and a cord that you can take from your shoes. I blew on the fire and the campfire started burning. Now it's time to thread the fish onto the spindle. Done. Now I place the catch on the fire and let it cook. I'm not in a hurry. I want to cook the fish well. Friends, would you like me to come back to this fishing lake and try to catch another big fish? If yes, let me know in the comments below the video. Also, in the video description, I've included links to the items I use in my videos. So, keep this list handy, and it might come in handy when you need to choose gifts for yourself or your loved ones. The fish is cooking and it gradually starts falling apart. But no worries, in about half an hour, my fish was ready. I know that the most experienced armchair experts would now say to me, "You burned your fish on the fire." But no, once again, I want to disappoint you. You see, that's why I didn't scale the fish, so that the meat wouldn't burn. And inside, it was perfectly cooked, juicy, and tender fish meat. The fish didn't burn at all, despite its suspicious black appearance. I simply removed the seared scales with my hand, and inside, the fish remains well cooked. The meat was very fatty and juicy. The taste of this fish reminded me a lot of our catfish. Look at the large piece of meat on the cheek of this fish, a whole fish steak. And inside, it was perfectly cooked, juicy, and tender fish meat. It was a very juicy, fatty fish and very delicious. The fish was not only tasty but also impressively large. I had a hearty meal, tried to eat as much as possible and packed the remaining fish into my backpack. And of course I couldn't resist and went back to the fishing lake to try my luck one more time and catch another fish. I gathered the remains of my fishing rod, put the last piece of fish on the hook, and cast the line into the water, while slowly gathering my belongings to continue my adventures. While I was collecting my things, I didn't even notice that my fishing rod started moving. I didn't expect the fish's reaction to be so quick, so I casually packed my stuff, not counting on a bite. But suddenly, at some point, I decided to look at my fishing rod and saw that the fish was pulling it into the water. I quickly ran up and firmly grabbed the fishing rod with both hands. It was another lake monster, a very worthy trophy. This fishing experience was like an entertaining series from the fishing lake, and I was curious to see if I could catch a big monster using the most primitive wooden fishing rod. Let me tell you, I enjoyed this fishing trip a lot, almost like a nostalgic memory of when I used to catch big carps with a wooden fishing rod at my grandfather's village. Thank you so much for watching, friends. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you'd like me to return to this lake and catch a couple more monsters, write about it in the comments under the video.